Welcome back to the Daily Kosher. Today we begin a brand new section, the laws of keeping kosher. Just to see where we are up to in the process of time as the Kosher Shulchan Aruch runs. We are in section 46, which is under the general section of meals and food. We're approaching the end of that general section. So today we begin this new section on forbidden foods. Let us start by talking about blood. So the Torah says, we shouldn't eat the blood because the blood is the soul. Blood is a source of vitality. It's a source of life. And certain foods, I guess, if it's non-kosher blood, which is most blood, then we wouldn't want to imbibe that negative energy into our system. Talking about blood entering into our system, I saw today an interesting question. Somebody asked the Rebbe in the 50s, just when blood transfusions were becoming popular, he asked whether there's an issue of having a blood transfusion if you don't know who the donor of that blood is. You don't know what's in that person, was in that person's blood, as spiritually speaking, what he ate, or if you want that blood in your system. And the Rebbe responds that there's no problem with that. We're not particular where the blood comes from. Obviously, there's often danger to life in the picture, so that certainly is an overriding factor. But that is as far as a transfusion. But today we're going to keep it more simple. We're going to talk about the places that we may encounter blood in our foods. The first thing the Kosher speaks about is eggs. The blood found in eggs is forbidden, and occasionally it's forbidden to eat the entire egg. Therefore, when using eggs in any food, the eggs need to be examined for blood spots. Let's chat about this a little bit. So, when the Torah speaks about why would the whole egg need to be forbidden? Why not just the blood spot? So the idea is like this, that if that blood spot is the beginning of a chick, so then that makes the entire egg not kosher, because it means that this egg is already a non-kosher entity. It's the beginning of the life of a chick, which is not kosher, because it will remain unkosher until it's shechted. And obviously, if it's just a drop of blood and it hasn't been shechted, so the whole egg having a drop that can eventually become a chick is a non-kosher entity, and the entire egg would need to be thrown out. Now, there is discussion where the blood was found. Was it found on the yolk or was it found on the whites? But the accepted practice, there are different opinions about this between the Sfardim and Ashkenazim, but today the accepted practice in all communities is that if such blood that could potentially become a chick was found anywhere in the egg, then the entire egg would need to be given away to a non-Jew or thrown out. Now, today we have a phenomenon called battery eggs. I know that those that are sensitive to being kind to animals have concerns about that. There's something called the free-range egg. But as far as this concern, the concern that we're speaking about of the blood spot, so if the egg is a battery egg or caged egg, meaning it's not a free-range egg, then it means that there is no male on site, no male chicken on site. And if there's no male chicken on site, it means that the egg will never become a chick, because the egg will never be able to be fertilized. So if it is a battery egg, then that drop of blood is definitely not a chick. So what is it? So it could just be that the chicken that laid the egg was somewhat bleeding in the process of laying the egg, but that blood is not the beginning of a new life. It's just blood that kind of leaked into the egg from the chicken. So that blood really wouldn't render the entire egg not kosher, since it doesn't have the potential for life. However, since for hundreds or thousands of years, it has always been, Jewish women have always been particular to check for blood and to throw out or give away a chicken that has blood because of the possibility of it being a chick. Today, even when that possibility doesn't stand, The standard practice in the Jewish home is that if blood is found in an egg, then the entire egg should be thrown away or given away. By the way, that's not only a red dot, it's also a black dot, because black can also be a color of blood. That's what it speaks about in the Shulchan Aruch. As far as checking for blood or checking eggs, again, it's become the universal practice that before frying an egg, that one should actually first have a Jew check it to make sure that there is no blood spots inside. Although on a more commercial level, in factories where the eggs are all being supplied, if all the eggs that are being used are battery eggs, then since there is no possibility of these eggs being fertilized, kashrus agencies don't necessarily require a mashgiach in a factory where they're going through, thousands of eggs. Mashgiach is not required to check each egg, since today it is less of a problem, since the eggs are definitely not fertilized. So that would be in a factory, but in the Jewish home, the custom remains to check eggs. Now, if you want to hard boil eggs, if you want to cook the eggs, so by the time that they're ready, you're not going to be able to check it because it's white and you wouldn't be able to see. So the practice is that there is a custom to cook at least 3 eggs in the pot. That way, if one of those eggs were to be not kosher, then it would be nullified by the other 2. And then if one is doing that, if one is particular about that custom, then one shouldn't leave the pot with less than 3 eggs until the water cools off. So that's something else about hard boiling eggs, to hard boil them in batches of at least 3. If one didn't check the egg, or one hard boiled less than 3 eggs, in all these scenarios, b'di avad, if it already happened, then the food would be kosher. Obviously, if you see red in the food or in the egg, then that should be discarded. If you don't want to discard everything, then you would call up a rabbi, and in light of circumstances, it is possible that he would allow you to go ahead and just remove the blood spot and eat the remaining food. So that is hopefully everything you would like to know about checking eggs. Moving on. So what about fish? So, I mean, as far as chicken and meat blood, I'll chat about that for a moment. So clearly, the blood of chicken or meat is not kosher. And once upon a time, when people would have a sheikh come to their house and sheikh the chicken or the meat, then part of getting that chicken ready would be salting it. And by applying salt, by cutting up the chicken and meat in a specific way, and salting it in a specific way, and soaking it in a specific way, that whole process, that whole salting process, would extract all of the blood from the chicken or the meat. Today, we don't do that. Today, that is already done before we buy our chicken. The chickens actually in South Africa are already salted at the farm right after the chicken is shechted on the spot. They have a special, incredible, sophisticated line where all the different steps of the salting takes place. Meat is shechted at the butchery that is buying it from the farm. So the meat is shechted and immediately packaged. And then wherever you buy your meat from, whether it be Moishi's or any of the outlets, they will have in the back a whole process of salting where they extract the blood from the meat. It's quite an elaborate process. And that is part of what you're paying for when you're buying kosher meat. You're paying for that salting process amongst many other things. So when you receive chicken or meat in your house, the blood has already been removed. Now, if when you cut into your piece of beef or chicken, you see a little bit of red, then and you might say, wow, this looks bloody, this looks not kosher. So that's not a problem, because once the salting process has been applied, then whatever much of the blood that is in whatever is halachically considered blood has been removed, and whatever remained would just be considered juice of the chicken or meat. So although it may still seem a little bit red, that's not a problem, obviously, provided that you've bought it from a facility where there is a inspector or mashgiach on site for the basin, ensuring that the salting is being done in the halachically correct way that it needs to be. So that's as far as chicken and meat. Now, as far as fish is concerned, here's quite an interesting halacha. Fish blood is actually kosher. So you could go to a non-kosher fisherman's deli and buy a whole fish and take it home and cut it up. And all you need to do is, and you can actually put it straight into your pot while it's still dripping with blood. And you'd be able to eat it all, and there would be no problem with that at all. However, if the blood is separated from the fish, then it looks like blood. And then there's a concept of maris ayin, that to the onlooker, it looks like you're drinking chicken or meat blood or human blood. So therefore, blood, while it is still together with the fish, is kosher. But once it has been separated and it's sitting distinctly, if a person was to have a cup of fish blood and they wanted to use it as some kind of gravy, doesn't sound very appetizing to me, but if that's what somebody wanted to do, then what they would need to do is actually add some fish scales or something, some kind of sign to the bottle that clearly indicates that this is fish blood. And if there isn't any such sign, then the blood is actually considered, practically speaking, not kosher, simply because of the reason that for the person that's watching, it looks like you're drinking blood. That's a concept called maris ayin. It appears to the eye, and that itself is enough reason to render something non-kosher. So in summary, fish blood is kosher when it is together with the fish. Once it's been separated from the fish, then it becomes non-kosher because of the onlooker, unless it is clear, unless there's an indicator that this is still coming from fish. Now, I've been asked why it is. I mean, the Torah clearly says that blood is not kosher, ki adamu nefesh, the blood is the soul. So why is fish an exception? If I remember correctly, I looked it up, and I believe that fish, being waterborne, represents a world where God is apparent. As opposed to all other creatures, animals, people, we walk in a world where a person can feel that disconnected from their source. So God is our source, but on planet Earth, we could sometimes feel like we are independent, as opposed to fish constantly feel that they are in the water. So that the fish being submerged in water represents the creature being completely conscious of its source of Hashem. Since fish, kosher fish, are waterborne, they're completely aware of their surrounding of godliness. Therefore, their blood is also something which only connects us to Hashem. It doesn't separate ourselves from Hashem. This is, if I remember correctly, just a little insight as far as the reason why fish blood is acceptable. Moving on to, we have a question.
Only of kosher fish. The other fish also separated in the water.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I guess that's explanation would need some added explanation, which I don't have handy. I would have to look it up again. Let's try to finish the section on blood. We've got just another few minutes, and maybe we'll even go further than that. So in halacha number 3, he speaks about if somebody bit into some bread and blood flows from one's gums onto the bread, or sometimes if a child will bite into an apple, or if somebody's gums are somewhat inflamed and they'll bite into an apple and there'll be a little bit of red on that apple. So the moment human blood, even of the mouth, leaves the mouth, it enters into its non-kosher state. And therefore, it's not kosher. So if you see a slight residue, a little bit of blood on that apple that you just bit into, then besides for maybe checking with your dentist to see that your mouth, that your health is well looked after, you would be obligated to scrape away any of that red residue that is found on the apple. However, if the blood is still within your mouth, then you would even be allowed to suck on it during the week, but not on Shabbos, because on Shabbos it would be a form of extracting. You wouldn't be allowed to extract. So another example would be if somebody places hot food into their mouth, if it's hot enough that it could actually cause the tongue to bleed, and it's quite painful. So all of that is fine. A person, even though a person will feel blood aggregating, blood accumulating in one's mouth. One does not have to spit that blood out. One would be allowed to swallow it, or wherever it is, any blood within the mouth. I guess if a person just had some kind of teeth procedure and they may be bleeding a little bit, any blood within the mouth may be swallowed. But the moment it leaves one's lips, then it becomes non-kosher and it is forbidden, and one would have to cut it away. So it may actually be a little bit of a task if somebody's gums are, for whatever reason, inflamed. If somebody is having an issue with bleeding, then I guess they can't bite into an apple. It's not really going to work. They'll have to cut up the apple and put it in their mouth piece by piece. Otherwise, there is a kashrus issue. And finally, as far as blood being in milk, occasionally blood is found in milk. When blood is drawn with the milk from the udder of the cow, and if this happens, then one needs to consult a rabbi. So yeah, it's quite interesting. As far as milking a cow, milk is kosher, but sometimes there can be issues. Here's an interesting halacha. If a cow is sick to a certain extent, then its milk is actually not kosher. And today, when there are operations that take place where medicine is advanced, and there can be procedures and operations that take place to cows, then that could cause halachic question on the milk of that cow. And this is something that obviously needs to be brought to an expert rabbi. And this also, this and another thing that comes up, which is not exactly related to what we're speaking about, is that a cow needs to also be milked on Shabbos. Otherwise, one is being cruel to the cow. However, the milk that is milked from that cow, it probably should be done by a non-Jew. And the milk that's milked from that cow on Shabbos, nowadays it's machinery anyhow, may not be eaten. Since it's one of the forbidden neighbors of Shabbos is to extract, and it's a form of extraction. So that's another difference. You have many different hechsherim, kashrus authorities in Israel. Even within Chalav Yisrael, even if they're supervising the milk, some may be of the opinion that if that milk that was milked on Shabbos may be mixed in and one can drink from that milk. Others will say that no, that milk needs to be sold to non-Jews, and that would make a difference between one hechsher, one kosher side on milk in Israel and another kosher side. People often wonder if it's just people say often it's just a money-making thing. The different kashrus organizations, not at all. Every kashrus organization needs to have a base. It needs to have a board of rabbis to turn to, and based on the tradition and opinions of those rabbis, they will need to determine what is halachically kosher and what is not halachically kosher. That brings us to the end of the first discussion, which is everything that relates to blood and kosher. Please God, tomorrow we'll continue to look at something that applies to probably almost all of us, except for maybe the vegetarians amongst us, and that is how we can make sure our kitchen stays kosher and how our mouths and bodies stay kosher